Hey, hello, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Pod. I am Brandon Mileski Pat Micheletti, former Golden Gopher great, with me as always. Hello, Pat. How are you?
Good, Brandon. How are you? I'm excited today because we have one of our favorite guests on, and that'll be. Been looking forward to having him on for quite some time.
Yes, Beyond the Pod is brought to you by Michelob Golden Light, and we are joined by former Minnesota Wild center, now broadcaster for the Wild, Wes Walz. Wes, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it. I know you were doing the broadcast last night in that victory over Edmonton. We are taping this on Wednesday morning. And about 24 hours ago, Wes, when I knew we were going to have you on, I started prepping some questions, what I wanted to talk to you about. And the first thing I wanted to talk to you about was the top line off to a slow start with Kaprizov, Zuccarello, Hartman. Kaprizov seems to get off to slow starts. And 24 hours later, I don't have to ask you that question because they were really, really good last night.
Yeah, and I said this during the broadcast, and I guess the first probably 2 or 3 games they just weren't generating a whole lot of offense. But I really did think over the last 2-3 games, especially Kirill, I thought his game has really started to look like it did, at the end of last year, all of last year for that matter. And yeah, they were pretty much unstoppable. Last night, and there's always talk about whether they should split them up whenever they go a few games without scoring. And I just putting my coaching hat on and sitting there thinking about it. You got to always be wary of that because with those 3 guys, you just never know when they're going to bust out and win a game by themselves. And that was the case last night. They were by far our best line, and I thought Kirill had his best game of the season, and they were taking. I mean, they weren't even just taking pucks to the inside. They were hanging on to pucks on the outside. I thought Ryan Hartman, in his interview after the game with Kevin Gorg, talked about how we did a better job, and it kind of hit me right in the forehead when he said it. He said we did a much better job of waiting to pick our spots when to strike, as opposed to just throwing pucks out front. And actually, Kirill probably does it more than anybody on that line. Probably you guys, because he's got the puck 80% of the game. But a lot of times he'll try these long, spinorama passes, and when they connect, they're great. But when you're playing great teams, guys, 50-60% of the time you're back in your own zone. So against Edmonton, you can get away with those things. But no, they were awesome last night.
Keep your coaching hat on. Yes, there was talk. He split them up, and how much patience do you have to have before making a decision? Isn't it? I mean, it's a fine line, isn't it? About, do we keep them together? Do we try to change it up? Do we give them time? I mean, that's kind of knowing your players, isn't it? And feeling it.
Well, it sure is. And you got to recognize your players. You have to understand personalities, how players are going to react. Every player is different. We're all different. Yep. We all handle situations completely different. Nobody understands the locker room better than Dean, obviously, and how guys would react to something like that. But, we're in the business of winning, guys. Yeah. And everything should be on the table at all time with any player that wears a Wild logo. You hear Dean Evison and Billy Guerin talk about the logo and not the name on the back. Well, that's the same situation. So as a player, you've got to be open to it if things aren't going the way they are. I think as a head coach, you got to be really careful, especially early in the season. It almost, if you start making changes 5-6 games into the season, we're still at 500. It's not like we've come out of the gate 0-5. And all of a sudden, people start to question. It looks like a panic move, things like that. So especially with an older team, the Wild have a little bit of an older team too. And so you got to understand personalities and when to do it. But I don't think any of that should ever be off the table, Pat. I think you're doing yourself a disservice. And as a matter of fact, when you break players up, we watch Draisaitl and McDavid get split up all the time. Like when you spend 10 games and not play together with someone you love playing with, then all of a sudden you get back together with them. There's that fire, that spark, kind of like your old girlfriend you broke up with, Pat, and you can get back together with her like 3 weeks later. There's that little spark. You get excited again. Yeah. So, and if you never break up there, that excitement never leaves. So
That's how I felt when Micheletti and I started doing these podcasts together again. It just felt like the chemistry has been reignited.
The chemistry never left you two.
You talked about not panicking, and it's we're only 6 games in, and I remember the last year the Wild got off to a really bad start, giving up a bunch of goals, and whether it was goaltending or defensively. I got to tell you though, Wes, I know it's only 6 games in, but this blue line without Jared Spurgeon is a little concerning to me. I think Faber's been great. Brodin, we know what you have in Brodin. After those two, I think there's a kind of a drop off right now, and there's a huge void on that blue line without Jared Spurgeon.
Yeah, we really miss him, and you guys know with him going down in the preseason what that meant. That meant the first 10 games of the season, there's going to be some bumpy roads. We just know that was going to be the case coming in. And, when Jared's in the lineup and you bump everybody down a slot, it seems like our D zone exits, there's a lot more like those little 10, 15 foot passes out of the middle of the rink. And then all of a sudden now the other defenseman's jumping up into the play as opposed to wrapping pucks around the wall. The other guys are good defenders for sure, but they don't have that ability to be able to escape and just make that small little subtle play. And that's not bashing them or anything. That's just who they are. And the cap situation doesn't come up. We don't talk about it a whole lot, guys, but we had an extra $15 million. You got Jared Spurgeon in there, and then another $7 million defenseman with Faber and Middleton and Brodin. Let's have a chat, and we'll see where we're at. Yeah. So that's we don't talk about it a lot. So we knew it was going to be bumpy. The Wild have been able to keep their head above water here while those guys are out. Sounds like Matt Boldy's going to be back, but yeah, Jared Spurgeon, what he brings to the table is invaluable. And actually, you guys watched the game against Columbus there the other night. Werenski was out of the lineup all of last year. He didn't play I think he played the first game and got injured. And then the next 2 games he didn't play. And there was talk in Columbus about their start and they can't win and they can't make plays. He plays the next night in Calgary. They won 3-1, and I watched the game back. He was unbelievable. And then he was the best player on the ice in St. Paul. Just one player can have that much impact on where the puck is on the ice. And the Wild miss Jared Spurgeon, just like the Columbus Blue Jackets miss Werenski.
Speaking about a player who makes an impact every night, Eriksson Ek. I mean, if there's, I know you love him because he plays that game that is so freaking honest. And, you want to talk about, I don't know if I wouldn't call him the most valuable. I mean, he might be the most important player on this team.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And obviously we know how important he was. We just lived it, trying to win playoff games without him. The part of his game that's really impressed me, like the last couple years is, and even the goal he scored last night, and you guys have seen him, in scrums around the front of the net, his hands and footwork and everything like that. I mean, we never saw that at the beginning. We saw a guy with a big, heavy shot in practice and he could shoot it really hard, but I never saw any small motor skills in his hands that I've seen now the last couple of years. Isn't it amazing when you score 25 goals in a season, all of a sudden your hands start to feel better and everything starts to feel great. But
I wouldn't know.
What's that, Brandon? You would.
I said I wouldn't.
You wouldn't know. No. Yeah. No. Yeah. I'm excited for Eriksson. I mean, he's got a chance to score 30 goals. There's a good chance that he'll get up this year, and I think if he scores 30 goals, guys, and the Wild can win a playoff round, he's got a chance to win a Selke. I think if he stays in the 20s, he doesn't. Well, Bergeron retired too, so he's kind of rented that thing out to anybody else that wants to win it. So it would be interesting to see if he gets to 30 and starts to get some love nationally, because I don't believe he gets enough love nationally, and we live in the cornfields. That's what we deal with here.
Yeah, that was a big time.
Hey, Wes, when you have Spurgeon down, and the D is not the same, and but there are things that you can do to offset that. And I know one thing that probably irritated you last night was the first 2 goals that Edmonton scored were won off a face-off. And, they weren't won. They were cleanly won. And you just can't have that. I know that probably deep inside bothered you a little bit because you were a centerman, though, that was something you took pride in. What is explain that to me, why they are having a difficult time winning draws in their own end?
Well, I don't know if it's just their own end, and the plays that you're talking about. I mean, it's all over the ice. And I mean, I was a 48% face-off guy in my career. I was not a great guy in the face-off circle. I had to really scratch and claw to try to get close to that 50%. And you know what, Pat, it didn't matter how hard I worked and how many tricks I tried with different centermen and different things like that. I felt like that's just who I was. Pat, it's no different. This is who we are. We just got to deal with it in the face-off circle.
Yeah.
All right.
Right.
You just,
right.
you're going to lose some face-off. Listen, Draisaitl on his strong side on the power play, he's 80%. He's 55 overall because he has to take draws on his weak side. But on that power play side, it's going back, especially against Eriksson Ek because he's a lefty. We don't have any righties that can even compete on that side. So you might as well in the power play almost just throw it out to the defenseman and then just tell your winger, you might as well get out there. I used to tell Auntie Laxton that all the time. I said, you might as well just start leaving before the puck, like almost like a one-timer from the linesman up to the defenseman. So we would get in position like right away. But the key with a face-off situation is if you're going to, you just like, we're trying to get to 45 to 47%. The nights that we get crushed in the face-off circle where we're sitting at 25 to 35%, those nights are hard to overcome because your mindset changes. You feel like you're on your heels all the time. You cannot be the aggressor. You feel like you're always sitting back and we never have the puck. It changes your psyche a little bit.
Yeah.
So for everybody, the key is not to try to get to 50%, just 45 to 50% in that area, and then just live with the consequences. I was talking to Darby about it the other morning before one of the morning skates, and he said the coaching staff actually have started to chart 50-50 pucks after face-offs when pucks sit in areas. That is being charted now. And I love the idea and the premise behind that because it holds players accountable. It holds wingers accountable. Okay. And there are a lot of pucks sitting around behind wingers, behind centermen stuff, and you can come up with those loose pucks. You're going to be able to have possession quite a bit more. So that's an area that they're looking to chart and get better at. So it's just, listen, Pat, you got to play after you lose the faceoff too. We could probably sign Mark Messier and Yannick Perreault and Zenon Konopka and be 75% in the faceoff circle and be 0-5. Would you rather that? So it's just the world we live in, guys.
Let's stick with the center. Marco Rossi, I think we all know about his year last year. Looks like a completely different player to me, Wes. And I just saw a stat this morning that he leads the Wild right now in 5-on-5 shots on goal with 13, which is, given some of the competition he's up against here, that's pretty impressive numbers. How would you evaluate the first 6 games of this season for Marco Rossi?
Yeah, it's been good. It's been really good. I thought he had a really a breakout game I think it was in Montreal. Brandon, where I was watching the game, and I think I even said in the post game when I was working that night, it felt like a coming out party. Like, okay, I'm here. I'm in the National Hockey League. I belong. He was making plays with a puck. He was driving into the paint, he scored I think he scored his first goal that night as well too. So, like, he's an important piece to the puzzle, and he doesn't need to be one of those guys that scores 25 goals and carries the offense. I mean, we got other guys that can do that, but he does need to chip in, I believe, with 10, 15 goals and 20, 30 assists playing on the second unit. And he has enough ability to do that. It has been fun to watch him progress. I mean, our fans have kind of grown up with him now, kind of like we did Eriksson Ek. We kind of grew with him. And it's been a slow process. It's a brick by brick process. And, him scoring, anytime you score a goal, obviously gives you a lot of confidence. And he was, even after he scored, he was banking pucks off the wall to himself. And it's just, it's incredible. I mean, it's incredible to watch, how much power scoring a goal in the National Hockey League and what it can do for you. It's really crazy.
Well, I would even say, Wes, one second, Pat, I just want to follow up on it. Wes, I had read from, I think, Russo during the offseason that he was changing his skating stride. And I was thinking to myself, man, at 21, 22 years old, can you really change your skating stride? It does look different. It looks more powerful. You can tell he put in a lot of work this offseason.
Well, if it looks more powerful, I'm not sure if it's because of skating stride. It might be because he lived under a squat rack all summer and staying here in Minnesota as opposed to training with his friends back in Austria. And I can tell you this, anytime you're training with other people, I know he stayed here and trained. When you're training with your fellow brethren, you train way harder. I don't care what anyone says. I don't care how hard you push yourself when you're by yourself. So if he trained harder and got more explosive, I think that lends itself to become a quicker player. The skating thing, Brandon, I don't know, bud. I'm not sure I completely buy in. I don't know, when you've skated your whole life for 25 minutes and you're trying to change angles and you've got different muscles in your leg firing that have never fired before. I think in games that might be great when you're out skating around with your headphones on and public skating and you're working on your skating stride. But when I got to chase Leon Draisaitl around in the corner, do you think I'm going to be thinking about changing the angle of my foot? And I bet, that just, you always go back to your natural way that you skate. So I know there's been a lot made of it. You're asking me, I don't think there's a whole lot there, but the training part, I think there's more validity there.
Hey, Wes, what I really liked about Rossi's goal last night is where he scored it from. And, people talk about, oh, get to the front of the net, get to the front of the net. Well, a lot of people are afraid to get to the front of the net. I mean, I don't care. They are. I got to get harder to the net, this, that, and the other thing. But to get there and do it and stay and hit the D like he did, he kind of pushed him away and got himself in a position to receive the pass. You have to have guts, that.
Yeah.
And I think that was a sign to me of maturity and guts and a big step forward for him.
Yeah, I agree. And they were cycling the puck around. They had the 5-man blender going, and I mentioned this during the broadcast. If you get the blender going against the Oilers, like, you're going to need a save. You're going to need a save.
Yeah.
And whether you get it or not, that's to be determined here in the next 20, 25 seconds. But when Marco did get inside position on the player that he had, and he had him in his pocket, and he knew he could do nothing about it, he just stuck his big butt out and it was over. Yeah. And Ryan Hartman made a great play. But the other interesting thing too is I don't know if you guys saw the play when Marcus Foligno was going to the net. I think it was in the third period. Someone dumped him and he went flying into the post, and Marco Rossi come flying over.
Yes.
And started face rubbing and like getting into it. And I'm like, yes, that's what I'm talking about. And I'm sure Marco was giving him on the bench. And thanks for jumping in there for me, bud. But those are the small type of things when you go back to the bench and you're joking around about the bench, because Moose is going to stand up for Marco. No one's going to be able to touch Marco. And so those are the type of things that I look at, that I know guys will go back to the bench and joke around about, but it matters, and you can see he's got a lot of confidence.
6 games in, most of the team coming back. We had basically one new player in Pat Maroon. What have been your early impressions of Maroon?
Yeah, you know what? Just watching him in training camp, in some of the practices when they were doing 3-on-3 down low, and just even small through the neutral zone, entries and things like that. Sweet hands, like really, obviously he's not a blazer. He doesn't have great speed. He's 35. He's a big man. But when he gets the puck on his stick, he makes plays. He makes plays, and he's very, very efficient with the puck. Like, he puts pucks into areas where his teammates are going to get them, and he makes a lot of small plays. And he's got 4 assists now in his last 3 games. Obviously he's playing playing up the line a little bit, so he's playing with better players. So when you're making plays to those type of guys, a better chance you're going to get an assist. But it's been really, really good. It's been good. Like, will he end up there as the season goes on? Obviously with Matt Boldy coming back soon, he's probably going to go back down on the 4th line. But getting 4th line production is going to be important in the big picture here for the Minnesota Wild. And having Pat Maroon play with those 2 speedsters, Dewey 1 and Dewey 2, Ryan Reeves serves a purpose. We all know that, but he ain't going to make those 2 guys better playing 5-on-5. Pat Maroon can make plays. And if he can put pucks into space and all of a sudden these speedsters can get onto loose pucks, we're going to be spending some more time in the offensive zone than we would otherwise. So there's definitely something there. The guy knows how to win. You can't argue with his success, and he's got 3 Stanley Cups. So it's a huge upgrade from Ryan Reeves. Huge.
Wes, thanks for your time as always. Really appreciate it. We'll talk.
You're the best.
Soon.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. Thanks, Brandon. Always enjoy it with you guys.
All right, thank you.
Wes
Walz, former Minnesota Wild great, and now an analyst for Bally Sports North. Before I chat with you, Pat, how about you tell us about our sponsor, which would be Michelob Golden Light?
I will. Are you a beer league hockey? Are you on a beer league hockey team? Check out our contest page at kfan.com for a chance to get yourself sponsored by Michelob Golden Light.
Excellent, Pat. I want to talk a little college hockey with you. Your alma mater, the Minnesota Golden Gophers, they split with North Dakota last weekend. Tough schedule still moving on forward here as they've got Wisconsin and then Michigan moving, and then a lot of the Big Ten schedule moving ahead here. But currently ranked the #1 team in the country.
Yeah, I think they made big strides from the previous week against a very, very good St. Thomas team, which we discussed last week. They got themselves in penalty trouble on Saturday night, I think, which hurt them. Played very, very well on Friday in the 4-0 win. But their depth is starting to show. Their D are starting to get more involved and more active. And I thought they had a good weekend. And North Dakota is vastly, vastly improved. I think they're number 5 in the country right now, 4 or 5. And they're a really good team. And it was a fun series to watch.
And Justin Close was named the Big Ten Conference First Star of the Week. A little leaky against St. Thomas in that first game of that series, but was good the next night and had a pretty good series against the Fighting Hawks.
Well, you need a goaltender, and they've got one in him. I thought he was really, really good all weekend. His ability just to calm everything. He never is out of position. He never panics in the net, and I think that's a real calming factor for his decor. Which quite frankly, a lot of those guys back there, even though Chesley, Middlestead played a lot last year, but they were behind Lacombe, Johnson, and Faber, and now they're getting the majority of the minutes, and I think he's done a real good job of calming that decor.
And the border battle, the rivalry, back at it again this weekend as the Gophers take on Wisconsin with a familiar face behind the bench, Pat.
Yeah, Mike Hastings. They're off to a great start. 1 loss, and I tell you what, this is so good for college hockey to have Wisconsin back. At least on their way back. It's going to be a fun series. It's always a great series when you're playing Wisconsin, but to have Wisconsin be good, really good, and potentially contending again is great for college hockey across the nation.
Minnesota Duluth, they swept Bemidji last weekend. They've got they're at Cornell. They get to travel this weekend. What do you think of Sandelin's team so far?
I was texting with Scott yesterday, and they've gotten off to a good start too. They swept Northern Michigan. They swept Bemidji. I think they had a tie and a win against Michigan Tech to start the season, but they lost one of their best players in Dominic James out for the season, which is really, really unfortunate. Really good player, and they're going to have to find somebody to replace him. But they did not have a good year last year. They had leaky goaltending. They weren't great defensively, and that's one of the trademarks of Scott's teams. And I know he's putting an emphasis on that. Plus, they're scoring goals now, so they're a team to keep an eye on. They face the Gophers next weekend. That'll be a fun series.
You mentioned Mike Hastings in Wisconsin. That means Mankato has a new coaching staff. They were swept last weekend by Massachusetts, and they have to host that North Dakota team that you talked about this weekend. So a tough schedule to start for Mankato with obviously a brand new coaching staff and new players.
Yeah, brand new coaching staff. But you know what? They had a little hiccup last weekend, but the weekend before they swept St. Cloud at home. Which gave them, some confidence. So I think they feel pretty good about themselves. But let's give them time. New coach, probably new system. They lost some players. I think they have 13 or 14 new players from a year ago. So, but they've gotten off to a good start. And listen, they don't like the fact that they were picked to finish 6th in the conference. And they have a little chip on their shoulder, and so keep an eye on them.
St. Cloud State off this weekend. They split with Alaska last weekend. What do you think of the Huskies so far?
Well, I think they're trying to find out what they are. They're not real strong up the middle. They lost a couple centermen that that I think hurt them a little bit. But they have a couple really good defensemen in Anhorn and Jack Peart, who's a Wild draftee. And Dominic Bassey is their goaltender, who's been okay, but they need him to play better. They always have a good power play. That faltered for them last Saturday in a split against Alaska Fairbanks. So I know Larson's probably not real happy with this team right now. And trust me, he's one of the best coaches in college hockey. I think they'll rebound the following week. They're off this weekend.
Yeah, St. Thomas had a tie and a win over Lindenwood last week, and they're up at Bemidji, so a little CCHA interstate battle this weekend. What do you expect between the Tommies and the Beavers?
Well, here's what I think. I think they answered a question. How would they react after facing the number one team and then facing Lindenwood the following weekend? And, they played pretty well last weekend, got 2 wins. And, they're a team that is, we talked about it. They're a really, really good team. And they're going to face a Bemidji team that's kind of reeling. Bemidji hasn't won yet. They're still looking for their first win. And Tom Serratori, would certainly like to get one in conference play this weekend.
Hockey Day, Minnesota. They announced within the last day or two, it's going to be at Valley Fair in Shakopee. And, Pat, they've been doing this for a while now. They've been going to different locations around the states, keep trying to find new ways to reinvent themselves. Don't know any of the matchups yet, but I kind of like I don't know where at Valley. I don't know if they're just going to be in the parking lot with the roller coasters as the background. I'm not sure if there's actually a spot inside of Valley Fair, which I don't know if there'd be enough space for that. But I kind of like the out of the box idea.
Gotta love it, and it'll be festive, right? The scenery will be great, like you said, with the roller coasters and everything else they have there. And listen, they've knocked it out of the park pretty much every year, and I think this will be another good venue for them.
All right, a couple minutes to go here, Pat. Let's chat. Let's get your opinion on the Minnesota Wild. As I mentioned with Wes. Great to see that Kaprizov line finally break out last night because they had been struggling early on here. I still am defensively. I look at that blue line. I say they're in trouble right now. And when Jared Spurgeon comes back, I think that'll have a huge impact. I think even though Middleton had 3 assists last night, I think he misses Jared Spurgeon as a partner badly. Merrill and Addison and when Goligoski was in earlier. It's looked a little rough back there, and I think the goaltending has been a little bit exposed compared to what they've been used to with the players in front of them.
Well, I'll agree, and you just you took the D. I'll take the forwards. That line is not going to be great every night. Okay, they were great last night, and you see what happens. But what concerns me is the secondary and the third, wave of scoring. If that line is not going, they can be, you can defend them. And if you defend them, who's going to step up? And, it was great to see Rossi get on the board last night. I think that's going to give him a lot of confidence, but man, oh man, if they get any injuries up front, that is really going to be a concern because quite frankly, I love Pat Maroon as a player. I don't think he can, and obviously he'll move when Boldy gets back, but he can't play 10, 15 games in a row
top
there.
6. Yeah.
No. And so that's kind of what you run into. And, we can talk all we want about Duhaime and Dewar and, guys like that. And, of course they're not going to get, you can't expect them to get 10, 15 goals, right? Because of where they are and the time that they play, the minutes that they play. But those are the type of guys that I feel are going to have to chip in when that top line is not going. And so that'll be something I'm going to keep an eye on.
Yeah, with Boldy out and the top line struggling, the one good part of this team so far is I think Marco Rossi has been pretty darn good. And he's still playing with line mates that I don't know if you can get your ceiling out of. Freddie Gaudreau has not had a good year. I think Foligno's been all right. I think he's been solid. I am curious if at some point, I know they kind of wanted to ease Rossi in here and kind of make him earn it a little bit. When Boldy comes back, him and Rossi have had a history together in the minor leagues of playing well together. You and I have talked about how Eriksson Ek seems to get the best out of Foligno. I do wonder at some point here in the future, and maybe it'll be another 20 games away, if, hey, we try to reunite Rossi and Boldy together and try to reunite Eriksson Ek and Foligno together. And because I think they were waiting on Rossi to show that he could do it. And we're only 6 games in, but to me, it looks like he can do it.
Yeah. And we also might run into a situation, Brandon, where, you brought up Goudreau, and, he's off to not a great start. But what if he doesn't get into that rhythm where, he starts to play better? What do? You can't do anything because of the cap situation. Let's say if Vinny Lettieri gets a chance and he plays well. Well, they may have no choice but to send him back down, or so he gets in a situation where this is what we have. We have to make the best of it, and unfortunately, they just don't have the maneuverability to maybe put their best lineup in there.
They still have Goudreau under contract for 4 more years after this. They signed him to a 5-year deal, and at the time, I'm like, I don't know if I want him committed that long. You know what? His biggest value that he brings to the team, Pat, is the shootout.
Yeah.
And they haven't had any shootouts yet. So
right.
It's one of those years, last year they had a bunch of overtime shootout type games and he thrived in those roles. That's where he can bring you extra points and really bring some value. I think if they're not getting overtime, which they haven't, other than the one game, I don't know if he brings a whole lot to the team. I get it. He's versatile. He can go from line to line. He can kill penalties for you. He can fill in on a top 6 role in short spurts. He's still,
you brought up a good point about maybe at some point putting Rossi and Boldy together. Well, it's all about, to me, slotting guys where they need to be. And if you look at it, if they do put Rossi and Boldy together, find him a left winger, whoever that left winger be. Maybe it's Foligno because, him and Rossi, Rossi, Boldy, and then you get Ek with, maybe Ek is, I don't care if you name it second line, third line. Yeah. Listen, Ek's got to get his minutes and every, and you get Ek with the right guys and maybe that
he can play with anyone.
Then you can say, okay, now we know our 1, we know our 2, we know our 3. We get in a rhythm. This is how we're going to play, and this is how we're going to win and be consistent night in and night out, instead of, well, let's move him here because we have to move him here because of an injury, and maybe they're not the best fit, but let's try it, and then you lose games. So, let's see when Boldy gets back how this all plays out.
Pat, great talking to you as always. We'll talk to you next week on Beyond the Pod.
Same, Brandon. Thank you.
He's Pat Micheletti. I'm Brandon Mileski. This has been another episode of Beyond the Pod. You can listen to Beyond the Pod on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch it on the KFN YouTube channel. I would recommend subscribing so you get those notifications when Beyond the Pod has been uploaded. Thanks for listening or watching this week to Beyond the Pod. We'll talk to you next week. Bye.